to engage in the presentation that Dr. Rachel Engler-Stringer will be doing now, called Supporting Food Sovereignty, a Community-Based Research Perspective. And Rachel, I'm going to pass it to you to introduce yourself rather than me doing it and then maybe not catching what you actually want to share. So over to you, Rachel, and thank you again for being here.
Hi, everyone. So there was a bio up there. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of bios, I have to say. Rachel, I work at the University of Saskatchewan as a faculty member in community health and epidemiology. I live in Saskatoon on Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis. Otherwise, so my background is it's in nutrition, but I don't see nutrition in the way that most people think of nutrition. I'm very much thinking about systems, and I'm particularly interested in more of sort of the social side when it comes to food and eating. So yeah, I guess that's what I would say about myself.
Thank you.
So are you ready for me to share my screen?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. So I've got a presentation for you. And I will just go through it. I will say I was given sort of 20 minutes to speak, and then there's time for questions and comments and so on. But if I say anything that you feel you need more explanation for, I'm also quite happy to stop partway through and talk things through. So yeah, feel free to interject, and we can have a bit more of a conversation rather than me talking at you. So I struggled a little bit with figuring out what to talk about and how to talk about it, in part because it's hard to present on so many different things that are happening kind of all at the same time, and also be me presenting, because everything that I do is done in collaboration with others, but I always sort of end up being the face of it, and it makes me, in all honesty, a little bit uncomfortable, maybe even more than a little bit uncomfortable. So it's a bit hard to talk about these things sometimes as an individual, because I've always got the sort of running narrative in the back of my head saying, well, everything I know, everything I've learned, everything I understand has come from all the things that I think, all the things, all the people, everything that I've encountered as my life has sort of unfolded. And so I've got my name on here, but I feel a little bit weird about that sometimes, because I feel like it's not really just about me and what I know. So there's my little caveat. So here on this slide, this is what Marla sent me. So this is the diet the visual of the diet transformation that I think Marla was referring to before. So I thought I'd start with this, because I looked at this. I don't know if you can see it well. It's a little bit, the resolution's maybe not great, but so there's aspects of everything on here, maybe not everything, but a number of them that are relevant to some of the things I'm going to talk about. So that's good. I think I can see the connections. So I just wanted to put this up first before I moved on. Okay. So let's start by talking a little bit about what community-based research is. There's a whole bunch of different terms that get put out there in the academic world. And for those of you not in academia, you might be a little not quite sure what I'm talking about. So people talk about community engaged research or engaged research. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of terms that are used. I have 5 principles that I try really hard to follow that come to some degree from the literature, but are also come from my own experience of having done work in a particular way for a fairly long time. So these are what they are, and I just wanted to go through them briefly. This is sort of how I approach research relationships. So the first thing is participation without intent. So I especially talk about this with students. So if you're trying to understand what a particular community's experience is, or you want to work with them in some way, or you have something that you think you're passionate about, don't start from a place of, hi, I would like to work with you. Start from a place of, going to events and attending and listening and doing some of that. So the analogy I've used for years and years and years is chop the onions. So be the person who's willing to do the work that nobody really wants to do because it's maybe not the most pleasant work to do. So I work a lot in schools. So when I go to schools, I tend to do dishes because I'm in kitchens, I work in school food. I tend to do things that maybe, I serve food, things that aren't necessarily the most glamorous works. And the second thing is long-term relationship building. So this idea that when you do this kind of work, you do it in such a way as to not think of it as I want to do this thing with this community at this time, but rather here's one step in a long process. I generally, the way that I work is I listen for the questions that communities have, and then I try to figure out an academic angle, so to make it fit with my work. So it's always about whatever the questions are, and then I just try to create create a situation in which it also responds to some sort of an academic gap or need, like a literature need or those sorts of things. Fourth one that I try really hard, and I sometimes succeed and sometimes don't, is I try not to be a draw on the resources of an organization. So when I work with a community-based organization, I try to contribute, like through salaries, through secondments, there's various ways you can do that, so that the staff or the people who are working don't, I'm not using the resources that they have, but rather hopefully contributing to their work. And overall, I would say I'd start to sum this up in the final point, which is trying to be creative in how you work with organizations so that everything you do is a net benefit to them. Okay, so that was just my little introduction. And the reason I think Marla asked me to be here was because of one particular project that we've just completed the first stage of, and we're just in the process of applying for the next, for funding for the next stage of. And this is what we call the School Food Development Project. And I've put up the goal here of the project. So I do actually these days exclusively research in the area of school food, so school food programs. And that's because I see them as connected to so many other things. And school food programs are a lot more than just food, or, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second, but I just see school food as being a way to think about a whole bunch of things related to our food system and how we take care of each other and so on. So the project was really about working with the 9 schools that are part of Middle Lake Tribal Council and 3 Saskatoon schools to basically facilitate those schools designing their own school food programs that meet the needs of their school communities. And it's been a really interesting process. And like I said, we've just wrapped up and we are in the midst of applying for funding to for MLTC, so Middle Lake Tribal Council schools, to grow and scale up and implement the ideas that they came up with and the design that they came up with through this project. I've already worked with Saskatoon Public Schools to put in an application for them to grow, and they were successful. But it's a little bit different through Saskatoon Public Schools. I can tell you maybe more about that another time or today later. But I'm working with both of these 2 sort of entities quite closely. So these are the partners in the work that I do, and the funders as well. So the project was funded by the Public Health Agency of Canada through the Healthy Canadians and Communities Fund, as well as some funding from the Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation. And you can see these are all the partners. I work closely with all of them at different times. Yeah, leave it at that. Okay, so just a little bit of background. Canada is one of very few affluent countries without a national school food policy or program. Now, I know that's changed. If any of you were paying attention on April 1st, there was an announcement. What that may mean in practice is a bit of a question still. But we are quite unique. Around the world, it's about between 2/3 and 3/4 of kids, when they go to school, they get a meal at school that is not a meal that they brought to school that was provided by their family. So they receive a meal at school. Doesn't mean it's always free. It looks different in different countries. And it's, there's better examples in terms of from all sorts of points of view. And there's sort of, examples that need a little bit of work. But globally, Canada is actually, we're kind of odd. We're one of the countries that does not have, or has not up until now had this. And that's why, if you got, friends or family or people from who grew up in other countries, they often are quite perplexed by this, because it's the norm in other places in the world. The data shows overwhelmingly that the diets of Canadian children across the socioeconomic spectrum. So let's be really clear here. We're not talking about kids from low-income families only. It is all kids. The diets of kids, especially during the school day, are not what we're looking for from a health and nutrition standpoint. And there is ample evidence to show that around the world, school food programs make important contributions to health, to education. They have, economic benefits, return on investment. And I also like to add to this, I see school food programs as feminist programs. So I see them as particularly benefiting women, because we are typically the primary, those who are primarily responsible for ensuring our households are fed. So just my little background on school food. Okay, yeah. Okay, so these are sort of, I think hopefully you all understand this already, with the value of using food for learning all sorts of things about the way that our world works, about, thinking through how the food system works, to talk about labor issues, how we can learn about plants and animals and our relationships to those, through growing food, through preparing food. I often talk about the value of sitting around a table together with others, and learning how we treat each other in that kind of a context. There's just so much we can learn, and we can sort of develop as human beings through food. And so that's a big part of why, to me, school food is just such an obvious place to invest our time and our energy, because kids spend so much of their day in the school context. Okay, so school food programs kind of existed for a long time. I'm going to skip through this because I don't have a lot of time. But really focus on the last column. We've come to a place where there's a recognition that the best school food programs that we have incorporate learning about the food system and being fully integrated with the curriculum. So including land-based components, the best school food programs are more than a meal. They are learning about our food system, participating in our food system, participating in producing that food, participating in serving others, in cleaning up, in composting, and so on, all the sort of elements that go along with a meal. Okay, so I wanted to go through what we learned. So these are the areas that we've learned through this 2-year project that we did, what I referred to a few minutes ago, with Meadow Lake Tribal Council Schools and Saskatoon Public Schools. And everything that's on these slides came from those 12 schools, from the words of students, of teachers, of staff, of administrators, of families in some cases. So every single thing on these slides comes from what was identified by people in these school communities. So the first thing is that school food programs need to put people first. We need to involve elders in school food programs. We need to bring communities into school food programs. We need to ensure that school food workers are paid a living wage for what they do. Right now, typically, cooks in schools are not paid very well. Typically, it's somewhere around minimum wage. And so either they stick around because they feel it's really, really important, the work that they do, but they're struggling financially, or they do this work for a period of time and then they move on to something else. So if we want people to be really invested in school food programs, we need to ensure that they're paid for the work that they do. We also need to ensure that they have opportunities for training. There's very little right now, at least formalized training for people who work as school cooks, and so we've been working a lot on developing some of that. And then there's this issue of summer employment. So one of the challenges we keep facing is that you put in a garden, you do all this work related to creating food forests and so on around schools, which is something that a number of our schools have done. But then all of the sort of labor, but also the benefits are come during a time when nobody's actually at school. So there's a challenge there. The next thing is really focusing on local control and building a school food infrastructure. So I'll just want to give you an example that we've been really inspired by, and that is Maskwacis Education Schools Commission. So the communities that are part of the 5 Indigenous communities that are part of Maskwacis, those First Nations have developed this incredible school food program where they acquire their food. They have a fleet of vehicles. They acquire their food directly from farmers. They have their own distribution system. They have hot, they have cold, refrigerated and frozen storage. They employ people as in transport. They're able to acquire primarily local food, and then they serve breakfast, lunch, and snacks to everybody in all of their schools, including the staff, and the staff eat with the kids, which I think is critical to good school food programs, that teachers and other staff actually are participants in them. And so they see this as Indigenous food sovereignty. They see this as taking steps towards food sovereignty for their communities by developing this whole infrastructure around school food. So this idea of community owned and operated food systems that are associated with the schools. The next is the importance, the critical value of traditional foods and incorporating traditional foods into school food programs. So MLTC schools have what they call land, language, relationship, and culture programming. And they really want to bring that into the school food program more directly. And this involves going to people with specific skills and knowledge within their communities, and ensuring they have the resources to be able to work with the schools to help kids develop those skills as well. And there's all kinds of infrastructure around that, and thinking, and issues related to regulation and so on. And but that work is being done, and I think is really quite critical, especially when we're talking about food sovereignty, that we really kind of bring these things together. Again, another area is gardening and growing. And there's all kinds of ways that the schools that I work with are doing this. So they've got these things called grocers, which are basically a unit that is like an indoor growing system that's connected to a school, where they grow primarily greens and herbs and other things that then get used in the school food program, and then extras can be either given away or sold to the broader community. A number of the schools are using, well, actually, I think all of them are using growing towers of various sorts. So really trying to bring food into schools and classrooms in a more systematic way. And also, as I referred to before, food forests. There's a number of the MLTC schools that are building food forests around or on their school property. What else? I don't think I want to say too much more about that because I want to leave time for questions. But I did want to say, so we've got this interesting moment that happened on April 1st. So the federal government announced a national school food program with $1 billion commitment over 5 years. It's not very much money if you look at it in terms of the whole country and in terms of a 5-year period. And there's not a lot of information yet on it, but there is, we've been told that there will be very, very soon a national school food policy that will be released, which I think is a really important step. It's one thing to announce money and funding and a commitment to do something, but a basic framework for how that will look, I think, is particularly critical, because people like me have been telling the federal government, if you're going to do this, it has to be done in such a way as there's local control, that Indigenous communities have the ability to decide what their programs will look like in particular, but overall local control, that there be no marketing to children in school food programs, and that there be a focus on a sort of a holistic vision of nutrition in those programs. So I don't want to say much more. What really the message I want to leave you with is what is part of why I value working in the area of school food, in that it allows you to think very big picture about all the ways in which we can sort of tap into how we think about our relationship with food to change all sorts of aspects of our society. So to me, school food is like this window on how to think differently about our food systems. And so, I mean, yes, it's about nutrition, and technically that's what I do, but it's so much bigger than that.